Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Aspiring Women Speakers event with Anisha, and happy International Women's Day to everybody. Let me introduce myself first of all. My name is Abby. I work with the Aspiring Women Speakers group and about 15 other communities, all of which are free and run by RecWorks. RecWorks are a tech recruitment company with a massive difference. So obviously, as a company, we are always on the lookout for more clients. Some of our best clients have come from community members who have recommended RecWorks to their internal talent team. So if you're hiring for a new team or you're working for a company that is, please do let us know. And if you want to know more about what we can offer, just ping me a message on LinkedIn or Slack. My name is as you see it on the screen, and we really look forward to working with you. So what's the difference, I hear you ask? Well, also, we really do believe that recruitment can be a force for good in the industry beyond just placing people in jobs. We have a particular focus on learning, mentoring, and personal development, and that's where our communities and events come into play. If people want to learn and others want to teach or share their knowledge, we are more than happy to connect you through our communities and events. We see this as giving back to those we've worked with in the past, but also paying it forward to those we hope to work with in the future. Earlier this year, we made our 5,000th introduction through our Meet a Mentor program, which we're really excited about, and we're looking forward to making our 6,000th introduction through that community. As I've already said, we love to give opportunities for people to connect, and this event is part of that. If you'd like to know more about any of our other communities, again, please do get in touch with myself, Barry, or Helen Lewis if you know her, and we can take it from there. With no further ado, though, I will hand over to Anisha. And just to let you know, today's session is being recorded, so you will be able to find it on our YouTube channel, and I will put the link for that in our chat as we go through today. So over to you, Anisha.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining and happy International Women's Day. So I'll caveat by saying I'm a bit ill. Sorry if you hear me coughing or sounding a bit ill, sorry. But yeah, so I'll introduce myself. So my name's Anisha and I'm a developer advocate at Amazon. So my job is to make developers' lives easier. And one of the main topics that I've experienced, or I definitely, find difficult in my day-to-day role, is managing imposter syndrome. And so I thought I'd put this talk together. So today I'm going to be talking about identifying and managing imposter syndrome. So how many of you have ever played the game Among Us? So if you haven't, it's a game where players are divided into crewmates and imposters. And the goal of the crewmates is to complete tasks to maintain and fix a spaceship, while the imposter's goal is to sabotage the entire mission before they can finish their tasks. So the first time I played this during lockdown, probably like most people who ever played this game, I was like, well, clearly this is based on the life of someone in tech. Because I was just going about my day while my teammates finish their tasks, and I'm hoping they don't see me as an imposter. So these things, like an imposter may say, are, I'm just here because of luck. I don't deserve my success. I'm a fraud. They'll find out I'm not good at this, or I don't have the skills. And if you've ever heard yourself saying any of these things, then maybe you can relate to what imposter syndrome actually is. And if you can't, well, maybe this will help. So this is a quote from Neil Armstrong. I just look at these people and think, what the heck am I doing here? They've made amazing things, and I just went to where I was sent. So this amazing photo was taken by Neil's colleague, Buzz Aldrin, and it just shows how, even under pressure, teams support each other. But as you can see, if Neil Armstrong suffered from imposter syndrome, you can probably relate. So what is it by definition? So imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern in which an individual would doubt their skills. And this goes beyond the mere lack of confidence. Like, people who feel like imposters hold themselves to an unrealistic and unsustainable standard of competence. Falling short of this standard maybe evokes feelings of shame. And that's what the dictionary definition of it will be. So how would you identify it amongst yourself or amongst your team members? But before you can think about identifying it, we need to understand that there are 5 types of imposters. So the first one is the perfectionist. So the perfectionist is someone who is one of the most common forms of imposter syndrome. And perfectionists often set impossibly high standards for themselves that they often can't reach. And they will feel inadequate if they cannot achieve every goal, excel at every skill, or check off every task. And any small mistake or setback can result in self-doubt, excessive worry, or feelings of incompetency, no matter what their level of success, and it will never feel satisfying. The second type is the natural genius. So natural geniuses believe that their self-worth is tied to how naturally they pick up a skill. They often view themselves as imposters if skills do not come easily to them or if they have to exert more effort to be proficient. And they struggle to begin something or grow insecure if it takes a long time to succeed. So if natural geniuses are not good at something from the start, they might even abandon that activity due to shame or embarrassment. Next, we have the expert. So experts believe that before they begin anything, they must know everything going in. They constantly seek new certifications, information, training throughout their lives to improve their competency. And experts measure their self-worth by how much they know. It would not matter how much information they know or how skilled they are. This group of imposters will constantly feel unprepared, unknowledgeable, or inexperienced. And this can be demonstrated in someone not applying for a position because they don't meet all the requirements. So, for example, there was a study showing where men apply for a job even though they only meet 60% of the requirements, but women will only apply if they meet 90%. And this was a study done by like Harvard Business Review and Forbes. And this just goes to show that like this is probably because the expert is one of the most relatable imposter syndromes, types of imposters like among women. So the fourth one is the superwoman or superman. And these people often push themselves to work harder than those around them just to prove themselves. They set high expectations that they need to measure up to. These high expectations can include taking on too much responsibility, work obligations, family tasks. They feel like they need to do it all. Otherwise, they are a fraud. And there is this need to succeed in all aspects of life. This can often leave these supers feeling stressed, overwhelmed, and accomplished. And there is a sense of validation for them in success and productivity. And finally, we have the soloist. So the soloist must always accomplish tasks independently, and they view themselves as failures or frauds if they have to ask for assistance. They believe that they can achieve anything and everything alone without help from others. And asking for help can often equate to feelings of shame, embarrassment, again, incompetence. Soloists value their self-worth by their level of autonomy and independence. So hearing these definitions, you might think that there is one or two you relate to. And what I've done this talk before, it's quite common that women mostly relate to the expert, and the men sometimes relate to the superwoman or the soloist. And because there are all these different types, there's definitely different strategies for managing imposter syndrome. For managing imposter syndrome, which I'll get into in the next part of this talk. So before I do that, I want to talk about how imposter syndrome got me to where I am. So without imposter syndrome, like I don't think I would have found myself in this role, because what would happen was I was a full-time developer, and one of the main, parts of the job of being a developer is you constantly have to learn. And while constantly learning, you're constantly learning about all the things you don't know. However, that sort of put me in the position I'm in now, where part of my job is learning lots of new things and educating other developers, in my specific case on Amazon product and tech, but educating nonetheless. And that was because somehow my imposter syndrome turned into me trying to digest technical information and share it. And that turned into, doing talks and conferences, and that landed me my job. So the point of this is imposter syndrome isn't always a bad thing. However, definitely, we need to learn to manage it ourselves and share these techniques with our teams. So now I find myself constantly in this state of balancing, myself on a rock between two hard places. And those hard places are imposter syndrome. So I'm in the state of balancing my imposter syndrome. So now let's talk about how you can manage imposter syndrome. So one of the ways that I kind of got these ideas of how can I manage imposter syndrome was doing workshops with my teams, and allowing people to give, their thoughts about what might help them, and letting the participants identify which imposter syndrome they relate to the most. So that sort of brought out 3 categories. So the first one is, what can I do? So the first thing I would say is to create time and space to talk about this topic. So making sure that within your team, or within your friends, or coming to talks like this, you are talking about it and addressing the fact that this is a syndrome, people suffer from it, and there are ways to manage it. The second one is acceptance. Accepting you don't need to know everything. So if you related to the expert sort of imposter, this can definitely be difficult. But part of, part of being in the tech world, and one of the main things I have to do every day is accept that I don't need to know everything. Like, there is way too much to know. And just that little acceptance every day, reminding myself that you don't need to know everything, really does help me. Give and ask for feedback. So this is a great one of reassuring yourself that you are on the right track, making sure you're asking your manager, your peers for feedback, and validating that you're doing the right thing. Share your experiences. So like myself, I'm sure I'm sure some of you may be able to relate, and sharing those experiences, or having, people in senior leadership tell you that they too suffer from imposter syndrome, definitely helps relate and makes this conversation open, and people have different experiences and different coping mechanisms. Own and celebrate your successes. So often we forget to celebrate those little wins, but just doing that, like saying, maybe today I learned a new thing, or for me, it's like I fixed something quicker than I usually would have, or I've finished a task that was difficult, and celebrating it and recognizing that that was something that I was worried about earlier, but I now, have finished and accomplished, making sure to celebrate it. The second one is, what can my community do? So create opportunities like this, create opportunities for people to talk about it, for people to share their experiences, to actually be able to have this conversation within the community. Advocate for feedback. So while asking for it, you also need to make sure that, say if your team is not doing a good job of giving each other feedback, being that voice and saying, no, I really think, we should take some time on a Friday afternoon to do our feedback, and provide those improvements or successes. Or feedback doesn't always have to be negative, we can talk about positive feedback. Encourage and enable knowledge sharing at all levels. So making space for people to learn and encouraging it in a company, I think is obviously one of the main ways to make sure that people don't feel like they have to know everything. And encouraging senior people who may have that knowledge to share it at all levels definitely makes, younger, new talent feel like, they can ask the questions that they may think are silly questions. Reflect and retrospect together what's working and what isn't. So I always love doing a retrospective within my team on what is working and what isn't, right? So what is bringing our team closer together? What is making people feel like, they're doing a good job? And what isn't working? What can we change? Provide recognition and encourage it. So this is similar to celebrating, your successes, but this is, as a community, when people are doing well, let's recognize it and encourage more people to speak up, to do more talks. Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, I said I'm recovering from a oh build mentorship and peer programs. So making sure that you're mentoring those like young women in the community, and even on a peer-to-peer level. Yeah, I think I'm good. Comes in waves. But yeah, building mentorship and peer programs to encourage people across all levels to participate, to speak up, to step up, and do more talks like this, or, you know, share their thoughts and knowledge. And finally, like, what can my company, or what can my, if you're a small company, what can my team do? So training on inclusive language. So I think this one's really important, and making people feel like they are included in the conversation. Making sure that, you know, when we're at work, we're not using like non-inclusive language. So I'm probably not the expert on inclusive language. I try and be mindful. There are a lot of resources out there, and making sure that, you know, people are trained up on what inclusive language is very important. Balancing challenge with support. So while, you know, it's good to throw people in the deep end, that may not be the best way for everybody. So if you are challenging somebody, making sure that they have the support to succeed even in that challenge is key for a company to do. Consider the impact of imposter syndrome on promotions. So sometimes promotions may be tied to, you know, somebody talking about their self, you know, what they've done over the year, what you know, projects they've impacted. Sometimes imposter syndrome doesn't allow people to think that they're doing very well, you know. So I might think that I haven't done as well as I actually have because I have imposter syndrome. So as a company, recognizing that sometimes, you know, promotions, if they're based on people shouting about their successes, may not be inclusive to all people, as some people may struggle to talk about what their successes have been. Address and deal with microaggressions. So again, microaggressions is those little things that people may say or do that are, you know, negative biases, or as it says, microaggressions. And like making sure that if it happens, you point it out and recognize it and deal with it, means that, you know, it won't happen again, because those microaggressions build up, you know, like if somebody keeps hearing it, they build up and linger on people's minds. And making sure as a company that there is a way to address and deal with it, I think is super important. Give scope for feedback on improvements. So this means like making sure there is space for feedback within the company on what improvements they can make. So having a medium for people to give their feedback on improvements, negative, positive, and having that space for it. And acknowledge and educate around imposter syndrome. So as a company, I think like acknowledging imposter syndrome exists and providing education around it is probably one of the best things, you know, they can do to tackle it. Yeah, that was a bit of a whirlwind. Sorry. I didn't want to end up coughing again, so I tried to like go a bit quicker towards the end, but hopefully, yeah, that gives you a few tips on how you can manage imposter syndrome, and maybe different ways you might relate to it. But thank you. And yeah, I'm open to questions if you guys have any.
Thank you so much, Anisha. That was really fascinating to hear from you there. And yep, Zin says great presentation as well. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, I'll take that as a no. If you do think of any, I'm sure Anisha will be happy for you to get in touch with her. You see all her contact details on the slide there. And for anyone who's watching the recording, likewise, if you've got any questions, please do put them in. Oh, we have a question. Fantastic in the chat. Thank you, Zin. So how did you handle it in the past, especially in the tech industry, as everything is changing so rapidly?
I mean, yeah, good question. So I guess those tips I shared were how I handled it. You know, the 5 ways of handling it myself, asking for feedback, creating time and space to talk about it, sharing my experience, owning and celebrating my successes. It's like those are the 5 things that I did. That's why I thought I'd share them. I think obviously there's probably more, but to me that's what worked, and that's why I put this talk together, because I thought I mean, I'm sure like we all deal with it in different ways, but maybe even just hearing how one person might deal with it might help other people deal with it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. We've had interesting question. What if you don't have an imposter syndrome? Is this even possible?
I don't I mean, I don't really understand the question, sorry. Maybe you could expand?
Yeah, hi. This is Rajni here. I'm sorry, I'm connected on my mobile, but and I hope you guys can hear my question clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been on one of the leadership courses, and they spoke about imposter syndrome, and none of that really matched. Because so for me, I believe that if you didn't like I could like go into a new domain, but I purely understand that knowledge is something you can gain. So you can ask people, look it up, and you can gain this knowledge. So and it doesn't faze me to the slightest that I don't have knowledge about anything. And so basically in that cohort, they decided that I probably don't have an imposter syndrome, but then at that point I had this thought, like, really, do I not have an imposter syndrome, or we don't understand, or I don't understand what an imposter syndrome is, like, or can't see the signs of it. And that is where my question comes from.
Yeah, I guess that also pulls back to what I shared about the 5 different types of imposter syndrome. So usually people think imposter syndrome is just, you know, like, I don't know it, so I'm scared. But there's 5 different types, isn't there? So like I think maybe, you know, some people might relate to more than one than the other. The people might not recognize that the soloist, so feeling like you have to accomplish tasks alone. Sorry, guys. It's a
really don't worry. I think you're doing an amazing job. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't want to cancel this, and I thought I'd be okay, but clearly just the talking is getting to me. But yeah, so like I was saying, the soloist, so like sometimes feeling like you have to do these things alone, like that's still an type of imposter syndrome. Or, you know, giving yourself high expectations and thinking I need to meet all these expectations to succeed. It's still in a type of imposter syndrome. So people mostly think that imposter syndrome is like the natural genius, which is what you're describing, which is how easily you can pick up a skill. But there are 5 different types. So maybe you might relate to one or the other. Maybe you're super lucky and you just don't experience it, which, I mean, it's great. Like you've mastered it. So
I'm sure it's just a blind spot. It's about recognizing where the problem is. But I'll be on this wild goose chase looking for it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Rajani. And we've been asked if the slides will be available. I would think we'd be able to get those sent out, wouldn't we, Anisha?
Yeah, I definitely already have them up, so I can send the link over.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Send that over to us and we'll get it distributed. That's no problem at all. We'll be able to get that sent out for you. Are there any other questions for Anisha before I bring us to a close?
Okay, I'll just pop it in the chat.
Brill, thank you. Fantastic.
Yeah, sorry I sped through that. I was just like, I didn't want to end up having another coffee fit halfway through.
That's absolutely fine. Please don't worry. We're just really glad you were able to come and speak today. So it looks like there are no more questions. So that all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for Anisha for coming to speak. Yep, go for it, Zin. You've got a quick question. Go for it. Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. We have time for questions. What's a developer advocate?
Well, I again have a whole article about this, so I can send it over as well. But day to day, I mean, I like to describe it as like my job is to be a developer's best friend. In my particular case, it's enabling the developers who are creating for Amazon to have a better developer experience. So day to day, it varies. It's very difficult to describe my day to day, but you know, it ranges from creating content like education, like tutorials, to writing articles that might support developer needs, to going to conferences and talking about, you know, new APIs, SDKs we may be releasing, or addressing like the community needs, so the developer community needs. So yeah, I mean, you can check out my website. It kind of does have, I think it has my article, but if not, I can send it over as well.
Excellent.
I'm looking for that article.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll wait for you to pop that in the chat, and then I'll bring us to a close. That's lovely.
That's the article that tries to explain what a developer advocate is.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing these. It's great. It's always good to have something to refer back to.
No problem.
So with no further ado, then what I will do is say thank you so much, Anisha, for coming to speak to us. It's been really great to hear from you. And thank you everybody who made it to join us this evening. And you can, like I say, you can find the recording on our YouTube channel, and I'll just repost the link for that in the chat for anyone who needs it as well, just so that you can get the recording if you need or want it to look back on today's session. And thank you all so much for your time this evening. And I look forward to seeing you at our next Aspiring Women Speakers event. And happy International Women's Day, everyone.
Happy International Women's Day. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.